I call the Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. That was a bit like watching grass grow, I have to say, listening to that speech. And I'm surprised, really, the member from Northland, big dairying area. I thought he could have done it with a bit of passion, given that the dairy industry is the number one industry in this country, I have to say, one still owned for the moment, Mr Speaker, by New Zealand farmers for the most part. The bill has, I guess if you wanted to be critical, has been a waste of both the Select Committee and Parliament's time. Because the day that the day before we had the first reading in the House here, Mr Speaker, the Minister had indicated that he was going to get a full review of the dairy regulations underway, something that is referred to in the Act, and in that this piece of legislation has addressed in a technical way. That is, and if you listen very carefully to every word that the Honourable John Carter said there, his associate, Mr David Carter, the Minister who could have been in the House explaining it. Nonetheless, this is a technical bill designed to continue the supply of milk to other companies that take and process milk produced by Fonterra farmers, I guess in summary. And without going back over the technical parts of this bill, I guess in simple terms is to say that there was the potential for the threshold set down when Fonterra was set up in 2001, in the Dairy Industry Restructuring Act, the threshold to be met, at which time an automatic process was undertaken, and that was the review of the regulations and the uncertainty that that may have created. So this bill was designed to offer certainty. Then the Minister decided he'd create more uncertainty by having a full review, and that probably is warranted, Mr Speaker. Since that time, we've of course had Fonterra step in and set the price of domestic milk at a fixed price until the rest of the year, until after the election, I'd say, Mr Speaker. And that was a move by Fonterra to try and keep ahead of what was rising concern around the price of milk and milk products, I have to say. This bill ensures supply to those people, some of whom are competitors, others who supply the domestic milk market here in New Zealand. And continuing the supply under a complex set of arrangements to establish the price, there are still many, many questions that need to be answered. And there have been indications that the Commerce Commission is currently looking at whether it should investigate, which is a very brave move for the Commerce Commission. It usually takes them at least 3 or 4 or 5 years to do anything, and they've decided that they should investigate whether they should investigate. Well, it's an ongoing process. I think they've given themselves 2 months, and I understand they are struggling to get some information from Fonterra. Now, we've had assurances from Fonterra that they welcome a review by the Commerce Commission so that we can get on the table the realities and the, I guess, the challenges of pricing milk on the domestic market, milk that could otherwise be destined for export markets that are currently enjoying record prices for commodities and ingredients, and the likelihood is that those prices will continue to climb a little bit, if not hold steady, and that means that New Zealanders will probably have to continue to pay quite a bit for their milk, more than they'd like to. Nonetheless, Fonterra have held the price, a political deal, I say, Mr Speaker, in an election year, and one that's connected to another issue of recapitalisation of Fonterra. I won't go into that now. One of the questions asked of me by my colleague is, what about Miraka? This is a small emerging Māori-owned dairy company in the central North Island. They are under construction of their plant, and they are expecting to get milk from Fonterra under the DIRA, Dairy Industry Restructuring Act, provisions. They will continue to be able to get milk until a comprehensive review of the regulations is undertaken, one that the Minister indicated would take place but is yet to decide when it will be completed. Mr Speaker, there are other companies getting milk, Open Country, Synlait, Westland, all competing with Fonterra in the international marketplace for the sale of milk powder and other ingredient products, Mr. Speaker. Many farmers think this is a bizarre setup, that they, as shareholders of a company, obliged to take their milk, have to supply milk to competitors, and it is a trade-off established at the formation of Fonterra to ensure that while having a dominant, that is well beyond 80% of the market, a dominant position in New Zealand, Fonterra should be obliged to provide milk and small amounts. 50 million litres of milk is not a small amount, I guess, if you're trying to put it in a bottle, but it's in relative terms a small amount of milk for our industry, so that people who are innovating, people who are developing new products can get on and do so with certainty over supply. The reality is that we have seen the setup of companies who are competitors, a number of them foreign-owned, foreign-controlled, and Fonterra and New Zealand shareholding farmers are obliged to supply that milk. Now, I'm not going to get into the debate around the whys and wherefores and justice of that, Mr. Speaker, other than to say for the moment this bill will ensure that ongoing supply. The issue of the price they pay for that milk is one that could be looked at in part by the Commerce Commission if they do decide, if they're brave enough, and they're not very often brave enough, I have to say, Mr. Speaker, if they consider that a challenge, then so be it. They are very rarely brave enough to take on some of the real challenges in our economy around pricing. But if they do decide to do this around milk, then it may identify who is really making money from the supply of domestic milk products in this market. The farmers make a little bit, Fonterra make a little bit, and the supermarkets make a little bit, so we are told. I think that the inquiry may identify the reality that there are some profits in the whole process, but the underlying driver of international price for milk is what is actually pushing the price of products to what many in New Zealand consider to be an unaffordable level. Mr. Speaker, Labor does support the bill. As I say, we found it somewhat bizarre that the day this was introduced, the Minister had in fact made it redundant, but it is necessary to stay ahead of what are effectively thresholds set down in 2001 and that are almost being met. Mr. Speaker, just before I finish, I would like to comment on the issue of I guess foreign ownership and foreign control, and the issue of restructuring of Fonterra. I think the government has done a deal that the price of milk will be held, Mr. Speaker, will be held in New Zealand during this election year, that the government will undertake to commit to process the trading among farmers, the recapitalisation of Fonterra, Mr. Speaker, which I believe is one step towards a slippery slope of demutualisation and floating on the market. That's my personal view. The Labor caucus has yet to take a position on that, Mr. Speaker. Nonetheless, that will lead to greater levels of foreign... Oh, Mr. Coleman, actually, it's very good that he's spoken, because that reinforces my suspicion. A man like he who works in the background, keeping happy the supporters and funders of the National Party, Mr. Speaker. I say that there is a level of foreign investment in the New Zealand dairy industry, and that is growing, Mr. Speaker. The international demand for protein is going to continue to climb as the world population increases, as the I guess the prosperity of many in the third world countries increases. They look to take in more protein, much of it through milk, Mr. Speaker. So the opportunities are huge. There are many investors offshore looking for opportunities in the New Zealand market, and the dairy industry is the last big multinational industry owned by New Zealanders, for New Zealanders, that we still control and are proud to own, Mr. Speaker. And if we let it go onto the market, I have to say it will be gone before we can say Jack Robinson, Mr. Speaker, because that's the way we tend to be as investors. Back to the bill, Mr. Speaker. It is, as I say, a technical bill. It's taken up a bit of the Parliament's time. It's, strictly speaking, unnecessary. Labor will support it, but await the outcome of the Commerce Commission inquiry into the pricing of domestic milk and to see what the government does with the recapitalisation proposals of Fonterra.